My name is Terrance Pelletier. I'm from the Cowessess First Nation. I'm a PhD student at the University of Saskatchewan. I'm in my fourth year. I've been sessional lecturer for about 10 years now, and the last couple of classes that I've taught is in Meadow Lake. And last summer I was helping out with the graduate level community development course. And I'm here to answer some questions about community development and how you define community development and how do we define community. And coming from Cowessess, we have to understand the demographics surrounding the membership of Cowessess. We are spread out all over Canada with a significant majority off the reserve. And so when we think about community development, it has to impact as much people as possible and involve as much people as possible to keep everybody informed of what's going on. And one of the biggest community efforts was to organize our band from a central office, not knowing where any of the membership was, and locating them, informing them, and talking to them about choices that they have as a member to vote on a land claim that was coming up, and it was a significant amount of the land claim. So the biggest job was to find them and inform them and keep them informed and keep them in the loop, and to give them the straight up facts about what was happening and what their choices are and what the options were. And so in the first sense, it had to involve them. It had to involve everybody, and everybody being very clear and upfront about what we're going to be doing as a group. And the majority agreed on that. So we got a large land claim with the votership spread out all over Canada and the world, in fact. And as a community development leader, if you're going to be that, you have to understand that everybody must come together for a central purpose, usually at a defined time, to do this, to carry out a common goal. And the community at that time on the TLE had to prepare itself as the anchor point for that massive job. And it took a whole community to manage that process. And then we had to select certain leaders in different cities, about 6 different major cities, and get them to help us organize. So it was like a big spider web with everybody coming together at a central location, which was my office at the band office, our governance center on the reserve down in Cowessess in southeastern Saskatchewan. And so we lacked the capacity at the time to manage that big of a project. We had no computers, 1 computer at the front desk, and 1 lady operated it. And we had a small office, and we had to plan for space. We had to plan how we were going to manage the money when we got it. We had to plan on what we were going to do at the meetings and where we were going to manage them. And that took about from 1993 up until December 1996 to finalize that whole process. And at the end, well out of about 1,400 people, where we only knew about 300 of them at the onset, those 1,400 people voted well over 1,000 in favor of that, and that was all that we could locate. We couldn't locate everybody. And the other thing is, when we're planning, when we're looking at our big plan on the reserve, we had a big piece of paper that was about 8 feet long by about 4 or 5 feet wide. It was huge anyway. And we put it on a big planning table, and we drew out the reserve, and we drew the different things at the different locations that we wanted to build with our newfound resources. So we planned on a new school, we planned on a new band office, we planned on a store, a mall that we didn't have. We had to plan and agree on who was going to sit as the trustees and oversee their money. We also had to sit down and plan how the money was going to be used and for what purpose. And we were able to look at other models that were already in existence of how, some of the issues that other TLE bands were having with spending, and we were able to tighten up those rules a bit to prevent any misuse or anything like that. So that worked out pretty good. And also when we were looking at that community development model, looking at it from the physical scale of our community and where we wanted to have things, we also had to understand that we have other members in other parts of the country that are not going to benefit from the land. So we had to figure out different methods that they could access the benefits of their treaty land that we didn't have for the last 100 years. So those had to be in place as well. So that was one of the first successful community development projects that was carried out on Cowes. When we did that in our planning session, the chief at the time, especially for all of the leaders that were going to be involved in that project from the beginning till the end, the chief and council, all the senior directors, and the people who were going to go out on those trips, we all got together and we had a sweat, and we had some ceremonies to prepare ourselves for that big job. And then we started out, and we did it. That was the first one, like I said. The second one was the summer games. That we needed again capacity. We had good direction from the FSIN in terms of how to set it up, and it worked out really well in terms of the planning. And I wasn't the chief then, I was part of the planning process, but I became the chief by the time the games were carried out, so I was the chief at the summer games.
It was an entire week of sport, culture, and recreation, renewing old acquaintances and making new friends. During this half hour, we hope to share with you the spirit of the 1998 Saskatchewan Indian Summer Games. Nestled in the Qu'Appelle Valley on the eastern edge of Crooked Lake is the 100-year-old community of Maryville. This is the site of the 1998 Saskatchewan Indian Summer Games. This community boasts one of the premier golf courses in Saskatchewan, the Last Oak Golf and Country Club, Cowes Community Education Centre, a Roman Catholic church, a rectory and hall, as well as the Cowes Mall containing the Bank of Montreal, Cowes Gas and Grocery, Clean Valley Laundry, Legends Restaurant, a post office, and 2 administration offices. The Cowes First Nation is a thriving community dedicated to the development of local services and resources, contributing to a harmonious, hardworking community. Keeping with this philosophy of local development, the current leadership is committed to the betterment of their people. This prompted the leaders to make a bid for the 1998 Saskatchewan Indian Summer Games.
Well, it gives us good exposure, and I think we're well along in terms of development, both economic development, social development, political development. We have a lot of infrastructure in our community. We have a newly expanded band office and clinic expansion. We have our mall that contains our gas and grocery, our bank, restaurant, post office, laundromat. We have our golf course, and we're hoping to get a new school sometime in the next little while. We have about 19 houses, I believe, that will be started this year, and I'm hoping another 13 will start next year. So it gives us good exposure. It showcases our band to the surrounding communities, to the Indian community in the province. I think it gives our band members who are spread out all over the province in Canada, gives them a good feeling about belonging to Cowessess, being a member of our First Nation.
And it was amazing to see a field, maybe, I don't know how big that field would have been. It was empty. There's a subdivision of about 40 houses there now. And there was nothing there then. And 4,000 people were going to come and camp on that spot. It was a big empty field that we got ready. And we had to prepare the garbage, we had to prepare for food, we had to prepare the field, and the camping areas. We needed water, prepare the roads. And all of those things were done exactly when they were supposed to be done. And as the chief, I watched it on a Friday night. Everybody had to start coming in on Friday because the game started right away the next day, or the activities registration. And I watched that field start from one tent going up in one corner, and within 4 or 5 hours, that entire field was filled up. And it reminded me of the Indian camps hundreds of years ago when they had to move from camp to camp to follow the buffalo, and how that type of logistics and planning is related to engineering, modern engineering tactics, to be able to take down and set up a camp like that for that many people, feed them, keep them clean and sanitary, and everybody fed and watered, and all of the medical facilities available for it. And so to me that was a big, amazing project. But to me that spoke to the capacity a community needs, and the direction and the help that they need, and the resources that they need to carry out something that massive. When I look at a local community development model, the one of them that we had to put together locally was the school project. We had money now, and we had planned we're going to put $1 million of our own money into the school. That was besides the $10 million that the government was putting for a new school, and it was going to take over the residents. And when we're thinking about the needs of the school, the needs of the community, the needs of the children, we had to plan on everything from the location, what types of facilities that we wanted, and we needed to understand, and what types of programs we wanted to run. And there's a model, and I can't remember who talks about it, but it's called the ecological model. And it sort of, to me, is a model of a living community, how a living community operates. And so those are other ones that went through. There's right now they're planning on having a farm. I'm not exactly sure how they're going to carry that out, but they use the same process for all of the plans now. And I think it's kind of like an established custom. If we want to carry on something, we put together a proposal, and we bring it out to the people in community meetings, and at least in the first meeting, and presenting the idea, and asking them for some direction or some approvals to keep moving on, and telling them we're going to come back and get your input on this and get your input on that. And I've participated in that process previously on the Election Act, where I and a number of other community members who hold different positions, lawyer, former superintendent of education, former chief, and myself and other community members at home put out a draft copy of it, and started working on it over a series of months. And then it would go back to the council, and they'd send back some remarks, or take it out to the people, and then we'd get it back, and we'd go through until it was a document that we thought reflected the wishes of the Cowessess electorate, And so once that was done, the chief and council took it out to the band membership, and that was voted on last year, I believe. And they turned around and asked for policy statements on our policy research on lands, and I carried that out, and that was used to make a decision on some reserve lands and its future use, and how the band membership should be involved in that. So those are being implemented, and they're also coming up with now. I'm involved in the constitution, the drafting of a constitution, and that would. We were talking about it this morning, and that sort of sets the how would you say, our vision, our purpose as people from COUS, who our membership is, and then from there, once we do it like a preamble. And then we go in and we talk about how our governance structure relates to the people in the areas of education, health, housing, community justice, community infrastructure. All of those things would be implemented in the same fashion. I believe once a constitution document is done according to that same process I outlined, then once that one's done, then we move on to education would be the next one. When we're involving our people in the planning process, it's important to remember that because people are spread out in so many areas, and there's so many different families with so many different interests and views, worldviews especially, because we weren't brought up all on the reserve. Weren't all brought up at residential school, and a lot of people. We have a great number of people who've achieved lawyers. The lawyer is involved in the constitution planning on this committee that I'm sitting on now. She was involved in elections as well. Another lawyer was involved in some of the lands research. We have many teachers. We have a few doctors, professor over at Indigenous Studies. And professors teaching constitution law as a sessional in University of Ottawa. And we have many nurses from all walks of life now, different walks of life. So we have a good, I think, solid base to move forward with. But at the same time, the community development has to address those that are the poorest, the ones that are most vulnerable, and needs to be able to address their concerns as well. And it's important to remember that when we're thinking about the relationships we have, everybody's in a different spot. Some are better off, and maybe their need is not as great as somebody who is a young single mother who is trying to send her kids to school and needs books or needs emergency help for clothing or something like that. So when we're planning how we're going to utilize resources to build a nation up, or else to help somebody that needs it, those types of things, we need to understand. People are at different locations in Canada, have come from a different set of circumstances, from being very well off and stable to not having anything. People living in hostels for people who suffer from AIDS and things like that, and people who are homeless, people who are afflicted from addictions, people who are still suffering mental illness from residential school. And it's difficult to meet the needs of everybody, but at the same time our mind has to be with them as well in the event that they are going to come back. I remember when I was the chief as well, we had a great many times they'd call and say, we have a child here that's registered to your band, and we have to make the band aware that we have them. And they said, is there anything that you can do for the child? And we'd get the call from Winnipeg, get it from Alberta, get it from BC. And in so many circumstances, I'd have to say, I said, for the needs that that child has, we cannot meet them. You as a government are better able to meet that child's needs than we could here. We simply don't have the resources. And in other cases, we were able to take them on and bring them home and establish them with a good family. And those families are still together and intact today. In other cases, I had to be called to by one of the child care workers that one of our young men was in one of the youth detention places, and they said, we don't think that he should be in there. He just doesn't have a place to go, and he doesn't have a family that can look after him, and he gets in trouble. So it's not really a criminal. And so I went there on my own to talk to them, and they let me go talk to him, and I was certain that he wasn't a criminal, and that he just needed some stability and some care. So sure enough, he came home, and that young man passed grade 12 and went on for training. He's like everybody else. He has issues, but he's at least has the opportunity now to have a meaningful life. And so everybody comes in different circumstances, and their needs and their concerns are different, and we have to understand that. So I think as a community, we've come up from where we've had very little. We had a huge influx of resources, which gave us the gave us the ability to develop our reserve into a significant bigger place. When we had the TLE, we had to plan how we were going to acquire the land, because we had the second largest claim. And so our band was, with the 46 million we had, we were entitled to. We had to buy 53,000 acres of land, and we had, or to a maximum of 90, but a minimum of 53,000. And we only had a reserve at the time that was 27,000 acres. So, and nobody really had the capacity to know how land management and land purchases were carried out. So we went through some training, some very good training. I thought it was excellent training for us, and it became very beneficial over the 12 years that we acquired all of that land. Our reserve land base today includes 90,000 new acres of land that has been purchased. And so all of those lands are under lease. So we have a total land base now, which is about 5 times what we started. It's about 120-some thousand acres of land. So that, I think, is an indication of what can be done when we utilize whatever resources we have. And that is, and if you don't have much material resources, the only resource you have is the people around you. And if they don't have the capacity or ability to help out, at least they need to be included, because we need their support in order to make it successful. And the thing I think about community, like when we talk about community development and who and why it involves so many people. Rob Innes did a study on my home community, a historical study about the relationships that we've had previous to coming to Kansas, and how some of the values and family connections that we had before we were dispersed by disenfranchisement. So many of our people were dispersed by disenfranchisement in the 60s, 50s, and the 60s, leaving, not coming back. But when we met them 2 or 3, even 4 decades later, to inform them that we had a large land claim and that they were entitled to the benefits of it as a band member. He was writing about how he felt people who, through distance and time and dislocated from their communities, were able to come back and develop those relationships again, and to realize that there is still strong relationships that exist, that they can be rebuilt. And he talked about how they continued over time through different traditions, through the different families, and that is what held many people together was the family ties. And then when we brought them all back again, how everybody, 1,400 people, nobody having met every one of them. I was the one that met the most of those people, and the only one who's met almost every member, I think. And to think about it, how he put it, and it's like when we say all our relations, it's the worldview that we have about our relationship with each other and with nature as well. That's where it stems from. All of us are relations. We owe things to one another, to support one another, to help one another, and in turn, everybody else has the same value. And when we think about nature, that's the way nature is. It helps us, and we have to sustain it. And so when we started out with the prayer and the feast, just to reaffirm our commitment and ensure that we still had a spiritual connection to our land and to the people that we were trying to help out. And so when it brings a different idea about all my relations, and when you think about all my relations, it's bigger than a small community. And when you think about those now actually we have the voting membership has grown to about 2,000, and our membership now is at 4,300. When I started working for the reserve, the membership was about 2,000, so it's grown significantly. And when you think about how far they're dispersed, but the family connections that exist, it doesn't matter about the disparity in where we're at, or how would you say, the demography of our band membership spread out. To me, it's still one big vibrant community, and it's alive. And we make sure that we like now it's got to be a custom since 1992, as we make the regular rounds to the cities every year, and at different times, to keep them informed of what's going on with some changes or changes in community development, or changes in the election laws. So are some of the plannings that are happening. They come around every Christmas, and we have a Christmas dinner together, and come out for community barbecues. So I think that when we're talking about community development as leaders, we need to be part of the people. We can't be separate. I forget the fellow called. It had a quote. I just can't remember what it was. You have to be with them, and you have to live with them. You have to know what they're going through, and you need to treat them fair as a leader, because you can't treat them fair one day and then give them the short end of the stick the next day. And so that's what makes the leader, I think. And so when we're trying to develop, say, a constitution, and we're looking at the preamble, and the preamble is going to cover us as a people. What is our philosophies? So and I think that's where the thoughts of all our relations are need to be recorded in those types of documents, because if we want to go back to our values and customs, our traditions, whatever kept us strong, all our relations is where it begins, and we have to go back to the beginning. Other than that, I don't have too much else to say.